breaking news now coming in. Does the Doklam standoff continue to haunt the India-China relations? It probably does, going by the statement from China's foreign ministry today. Or could this be a warning to India to be more careful in the event of another confrontation? Well, this is what China's foreign ministry said a short while back. In 2017, the China-India relations have maintained a good momentum generally, but the Doklam incident posed a major test for the two neighbors in Asia. We should learn the lessons from the incident today to avoid any further conflict of this kind in the future. Again, the ripples coming in when it pertains to India and China, when it pertains to the Doklam standoff, does it still haunt in the India, especially the India-China relations? Here's the latest that we have. It probably does, going by the statement the China's foreign ministry earlier released, talking about a warning to India to be more careful in the event of another type of a situation around a 2-month standoff earlier this summer. This is what China's foreign ministry earlier responded. Let's go straight to our senior editor. We have Surya Gangadharan joining us live from the international desk with the very latest on the tense relationship that India and China share. What can we make of China's statements, Surya?
First of all, there's no doubt that whether it's on the Chinese side or the Indian side, there was a concern that the Doklam standoff could at some point escalate. Fortunately, it didn't, and this is due to the thinking on both sides that wanted to avoid a conflagration. Also because of the Chinese understanding that tactically they were in an inferior position on Doklam, and therefore they could not even think in terms of a military assault. So that is one part of the story. The other part is that China feels that it has not taken the measure of India during the standoff, which is why they were caught unprepared when India decided to go in for a face-to-face confrontation and would not back down, which explains the manner in which the Chinese foreign ministry reacted. Then we had Global Times pitching in, we had the other sections of the Chinese media, we had Chinese academics, because this is something that they have never accepted India to do, that it would stand up to them and tell them to back off. Ultimately, the Chinese backed off. It's something which bothers them even now, but they also see it as a lesson learnt, and they see ways in which they can sit down, talk to India about some of these issues that bother them, including our issues on the border. So hopefully there's a way forward out of all this.
All right, stand by there, Surya. Let's also bring in Sushant Sareen joining us now over the phone with the very latest strategic expert getting perspective on this. Certainly a major test, the Doklam test for India and China, but there's new development now coming in as it pertains to China. I mean, what can we infer from that?
Well, ever since the standoff has ended, I think the Chinese have been making some statements, including one from the Foreign Office, saying that, the bilateral relations got severely strained because of the standoff. And now if there is the statement that both sides need to learn lessons, I don't know whether they're saying both sides need to learn lessons, but I think there are lessons to be learned by both sides. From the Indian side, the lesson to be learned is that, it's important not to back down in the face of Chinese provocations and yet not get hysterical as the Chinese did. And I think it was Surya who was speaking before me, and he was quite right that the way the Chinese reacted, made them appear to be rather puerile and petulant, rather than, the kind of mature nation that the Chinese project themselves to be. But from the Chinese side, I think these statements also hint that they continue to smart under, the kind of rebuff they received from India at Doklam. And the apprehensions among many Indian strategists that the Chinese could try and indulge in another provocative act somewhere along the entire length of the border, probably in areas where India might not be as well placed as it was in Doklam, is something that we should continue to look at rather seriously. Chances are that the Chinese will want to try and make a point, and that is what we need to understand. But clearly there are lessons on both sides. That the unnecessary provocations along the border don't really help bilateral relations. And both sides need to talk about it with a fair degree of seriousness, especially since Prime Minister Modi's government has been making a very serious push to try and settle the boundary issue so that both countries can get along and remove one of the biggest irritants in the bilateral relationship.
Right, very interesting observation there. Let's also bring in Surya Gangadharan back into the conversation. Surya, the timing of all of that earlier on when the standoff took place around the BRICS summit, and then China coming back and saying we've had a good momentum, a good relationship, minus the Doklam incident, but that posed a major test. Some lessons learned. What are some of those lessons that both perhaps India and China are set to gain or learn to avoid a future Doklam-like standoff?
I think one of the questions that a lot of Indian and Chinese diplomats were concerned about was the fact that although we've built up various confidence-building measures over so many years, somehow these didn't seem to work adequately during the period of the standoff. So when Yang Jiechi, the Chinese representative, arrives tomorrow, I would presume they'll be looking at some of these issues to ensure that the confidence-building measures we have worked on, all the ground-level steps we have taken to build confidence and to get our trust, to ensure that these are strengthened and standoffs of this kind do not recur.
All right, Surya Gangadharan getting us the very latest there. Thank you for those updates.